Some people count sheep when they can't sleep. I count the number of ways my marriage could go to hell. Tonight, I didn't have to count very high. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. in angry red numbers. Julia thought I was asleep, but years of military training had taught me to sleep light and wake silent. That's probably why I heard her slip out of bed and pad barefoot to the guest room down the hall. My name is Evan Mercer, and up until 3 minutes ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life. Decent wife, decent house in this godforsaken corner of Maine, decent cover story for what I really do for a living. Security consultant, I tell people. It's not entirely a lie. I do consult on security matters. I just don't mention that my clients include certain 3-letter agencies that officially don't exist. Julia's voice drifted through the thin walls of our restored Victorian home like smoke through a screen door. She was trying to whisper, but excitement made her careless. Relax, Brent. He has no idea what's coming. A pause. Tomorrow night, when I'm at Lindsay's for girls' night, bring Derek and make it look like a real burglary. Hit the safe in the basement. I'll leave you the combination. My blood turned to ice water, but I kept my breathing steady and regular. In Kandahar, staying calm when the world went sideways was the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. This felt remarkably similar. He keeps cash down there, plus some electronics we can fence, Julia continued. Her voice carried that breathless quality I used to think was reserved for our bedroom. Apparently, I was wrong about a lot of things. After the insurance payout, we can be together properly. No more sneaking around. I eased out of bed with the silence that had once let me get within 50 yards of Taliban commanders. The hardwood floor was cold against my bare feet as I crept to the doorway. Through the crack, I could see Julia perched on the edge of the guest bed, phone pressed to her ear, wearing nothing but the silk nightgown I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. Don't worry about Evan, she said with a laugh that could have stripped paint. He's completely clueless, spends all his time in that stupid basement office playing soldier boy with his computer games. He won't even know what hit him. Computer games, right. If she only knew that those games included real-time satellite feeds and encrypted communications with handlers in Langley. But Julia had never been curious about the details of my work, which had always suited me fine. Operational security and all that. I love you too, she whispered into the phone. See you tomorrow night, baby. I was back in bed with my eyes closed and breathing steady by the time she slipped back under the covers. She settled in beside me with a contented sigh, probably already dreaming about her new life with Brent, whoever the hell he was. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling and listening to my wife sleep peacefully next to me. The woman who'd just arranged to have me robbed and probably killed, because, let's be honest, burglars who leave witnesses tend to have short careers, was now curled up against my shoulder like a trusting kitten. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the last 5 years protecting my country from threats she'd never even know existed, and the biggest threat to my life was sharing my bed. Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Julia made coffee and scrambled eggs like it was any other Thursday, chattering about her day at the law firm where she worked as a junior partner. She specialized in family law, which now struck me as particularly appropriate. I'm having dinner with Lindsay tonight, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Girl talk, you know how it is. Sure, I replied, buttering my toast with the same steady hands that had once assembled sniper rifles in complete darkness. Have fun. She kissed my cheek on her way out, and I caught a whiff of the expensive perfume she'd started wearing recently. Funny how I hadn't connected the dots before. When you're looking for Taliban insurgents, you develop a pretty keen eye for behavioral changes. When you're married to someone, you apparently develop selective blindness. After Julia left for work, I went down to my basement office. She was right about one thing. I did spend a lot of time down there. What she didn't know was that the room behind the false wall contained enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous, plus a gun safe that held considerably more than hunting rifles. I pulled up the tracking software on my computer. The GPS chip I'd sewn into Julia's purse lining 6 months ago, standard operational security for a man in my line of work, showed her at the law firm downtown. But I was more interested in her phone records. Breaking into cell phone accounts isn't rocket science when you have the right tools and training. Within an hour, I had Julia's complete call and text history spread across 3 monitors. The picture it painted was uglier than a Maine winter. Brent Holloway. 28 years old, trust fund baby, drove a silver Porsche and lived in the luxury apartments on Elm Street. According to his social media profiles, which people really should lock down better, he had a hobby of seducing married women. Julia was just his latest conquest, though apparently she was special enough to merit a long-term relationship. Their text exchange from last week made my coffee taste like battery acid. Julia. Evan's so boring. All he does is sit in that basement and pretend he's important. Brent. Soon you won't have to pretend to care about his war stories anymore. Julia. I can't wait. He has no idea what's coming. Brent. Trust funds not enough for the lifestyle I want to give you. This insurance money will set us up perfectly. Julia. What if something goes wrong? Brent. Derek's done this before, clean and simple. Burglary gone bad. These things happen. Burglary gone bad. Right. I'd seen enough burglaries gone bad in my career to know they usually involved homeowners who couldn't identify the perpetrators afterward, permanently. I leaned back in my chair and considered my options. I could call the police, but what would I tell them? My wife is planning to have me killed, and here's the evidence I obtained through illegal surveillance. That would go over well. I could disappear. New identity, new life. Let Julia and her boyfriend wonder what happened to boring old Evan Mercer. But that would mean letting them win, and I'd never been much good at losing. Or I could do what I'd been trained to do, neutralize the threat. Not permanently, of course. I wasn't a psychopath, and despite what Julia apparently thought, I wasn't stupid enough to commit murder when there were so many more creative options available. I opened a new file on my computer and began typing, Operation, Homewreck, Phase 1. The first rule of warfare is know your enemy. I already had a good start on that front, but intelligence gathering is an ongoing process. I spent the rest of the day building detailed profiles on Julia, Brent, and their associates. Derek turned out to be Derek Paulson, a small-time criminal with 2 breaking and entering convictions and a gambling problem. Lindsay was Lindsay Chen, Julia's best friend since law school, and apparently her alibi for tonight's festivities. By the time Julia came home at 6:30, I had a complete operational plan mapped out. She found me in the living room reading a paperback thriller and drinking a beer. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, and I had to admire her acting skills. If I hadn't heard her phone call, I might have actually believed she cared. "Same old thing," I replied. "Boring security consultant stuff. You know how it is." She smiled and kissed my forehead. "I'm going to grab a quick shower before I head over to Lindsay's. Don't wait up. We'll probably be out late." "Sure thing. Have fun with the girls." As soon as I heard the shower running, I went to work. The listening device I planted in Julia's purse was military grade, voice-activated, encrypted transmission, and about the size of a shirt button. She'd never find it, and even if she did, she'd never be able to trace it back to me. I also took the liberty of adjusting a few things around the house. The motion sensors I installed in the basement were invisible to the naked eye, but would give me real-time updates on any uninvited guests. The cameras were even better hidden, and the audio pickups would catch every word spoken in my house. Julia emerged from the shower looking like $1 million, which I suppose was appropriate, given what she thought she was about to inherit. She'd chosen a black dress that hugged her curves and heels that made her legs look like they went on forever. Funny how she'd never dressed up for girls' night before. "You look nice," I said, and meant it. Whatever else Julia was, she'd never been hard to look at. "Thanks." She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror and adjusted her lipstick. "I should be back by midnight." "Drive safe." She kissed me goodbye, and I tasted the lie on her lips. After Julia left, I settled in to wait. The listening device in her purse was already transmitting, and I could hear her car radio playing soft rock as she drove across town. But instead of heading toward Lindsay's house on Maple Street, she took a right on Elm and pulled into the parking lot of the luxury apartments where Brent lived. Perfect, I muttered, pulling up the building's security system on my laptop. Amazing how many supposedly secure buildings had laughably weak digital security. Within 10 minutes, I had access to their camera feeds and could watch Julia take the elevator to the 3rd floor. She knocked on apartment 3B, and the door opened to reveal a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes, and the kind of smile that probably worked on a lot of women. He pulled Julia into his arms and kissed her like a man who thought he was about to become very wealthy. I couldn't hear their conversation through the apartment door, but I didn't need to. The listening device in Julia's purse was picking up everything. "Are you sure Derek knows what he's doing?" Julia asked, and I could hear the nervousness in her voice. "Relax, baby. Derek's a professional. He's done this kind of thing before." Brent's voice had the smooth confidence of a man who'd never had to work for anything in his life. "He'll be in and out in 20 minutes. Your husband will never know what hit him." "What if Evan wakes up?" "That's why Derek's bringing insurance. Don't worry, it'll look like a burglary gone wrong. These things happen all the time." "Insurance? Right." I'd seen Derek's file. His idea of insurance probably involved a crowbar to the skull. Good thing I wasn't planning to be home when he arrived. I spent the next hour making final preparations. The house was wired for sound and video, with hidden cameras covering every angle. Motion sensors would track any movement, and the silent alarm system would alert me the moment someone breached the perimeter. I also took the liberty of making a few modifications to the basement safe they were planning to rob. Let's just say Derek was going to get a bigger surprise than he bargained for. At 11:47 p.m., my perimeter alarms went off. 2 figures were approaching the house from the backyard, moving with the kind of exaggerated stealth that screamed amateur hour. I was positioned in Mrs. Whitcomb's garden shed next door, with a clear view of my house and a laptop showing me feeds from all the internal cameras. Derek Paulson was exactly what I'd expected. Medium height, wiry build, wearing dark clothes and a ski mask that made him look like a discount ninja. His companion was a surprise. Instead of bringing another criminal, he'd brought Lindsay Chen. Julia's best friend was apparently more involved in this scheme than I'd realized. They jimmied the back door with the kind of technique that would have made my old drill sergeant weep. It took them nearly 5 minutes to defeat a lock I could have picked in 30 seconds, but eventually they were inside, whispering to each other like teenagers sneaking past their parents. "Remember, make it look real," Lindsay hissed. "Trash the place, but don't take anything too obvious." "I know what I'm doing," Derek replied, though his hands were shaking as he pulled out a flashlight. They moved through my house like they owned it, which I suppose they thought they would soon enough. Derek headed straight for the basement while Lindsay started tossing the living room, overturning furniture and emptying drawers with theatrical enthusiasm. I watched Derek descend the basement stairs and approach my safe. Julia had given him the combination, of course, so he had no trouble opening it. What he found inside, however, wasn't quite what he'd expected. Instead of cash and electronics, the safe contained a single manila envelope and a digital voice recorder. Derek opened the envelope and found printed transcripts of every text message between Julia and Brent, along with photos of them together and a detailed timeline of their affair. The voice recorder contained Julia's phone call from the night before, where she'd arranged this little break-in. But the real surprise was waiting when Derek tried to leave the basement. The motion sensors I'd installed triggered a magnetic lock on the basement door, trapping him downstairs. At the same time, a hidden speaker system activated, filling the house with my voice. "Good evening, Derek. And Lindsay. I hope you're enjoying your visit to my home." I could see Lindsay freeze in the living room, her face going white with terror. Derek was pounding on the basement door and shouting obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. By now, Derek has discovered that my safe doesn't contain what he was expecting. Instead, he's found evidence of my wife's infidelity and your conspiracy to rob me. This evidence has already been uploaded to a secure server and will be automatically forwarded to the police if I don't check in every hour. Lindsay was looking around frantically, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. I'd installed the speakers behind the walls during our renovation last year, telling Julia they were for a whole house audio system, which, in a way, they were. You have two choices, I continued. You can continue with your plan and spend the next 10 to 15 years in prison for conspiracy, burglary, and attempted murder. Or you can walk out that door right now and never come back. Derek had stopped pounding on the basement door and was listening now. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he realized how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. If you choose option 2, you have exactly 60 seconds to leave my property. After that, the police will be here, and your window of opportunity will be closed permanently. I didn't need to count down. Lindsay was already running for the back door, and I could hear Derek cursing as he tried to find another way out of the basement. The magnetic lock would release automatically in 15 minutes, giving him plenty of time to escape, but not enough time to cause any real damage. From my position in the garden shed, I watched Lindsay sprint across the backyard like her hair was on fire. Derek emerged from the house about 10 minutes later, looking like a man who'd just seen his own ghost. They didn't stop running until they reached the street. I waited another hour to make sure they were really gone, then returned to my house. Everything was exactly as I'd expected. The living room was trashed, the basement safe was open, and there were fingerprints everywhere. Perfect evidence for what came next. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee when Julia came home at 12:43 a.m. She looked appropriately disheveled, like a woman who'd spent the evening drinking wine and gossiping with her girlfriend. Her acting skills really were impressive. "Hey, honey," she said, kissing my cheek. "You're up late." "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "How was girls' night?" "Oh, you know Lindsay." She had drama with her boyfriend again. We talked until midnight. Julia yawned dramatically. "I'm exhausted." "Coming to bed?" "In a few minutes. I want to finish this chapter." She headed upstairs, and I listened to her moving around in our bedroom. The hidden microphone I'd installed in the ceiling fan picked up everything, including her phone call to Brent. "Something went wrong," she whispered. "Derek and Lindsay never showed up. I've been calling them all night, but they're not answering." I couldn't hear Brent's side of the conversation, but Julia's responses painted a clear picture. "What do you mean, they got spooked?" "They were supposed to be professionals." A pause. "Well, call Derek again. We need to know what happened." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean he's leaving town?" "Brent, what the hell is going on?" I smiled and turned the page of my book. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. The next morning, Julia was on edge. She jumped every time the phone rang and kept checking the news for reports of break-ins or arrests. I played the role of oblivious husband perfectly, chattering about my plans for the weekend and asking if she wanted to go out for dinner. "I'm not really hungry," she said, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. "Maybe we should just stay in tonight." "Sure thing. We can order pizza and watch a movie." After Julia left for work, I drove across town to the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar that served as the unofficial information exchange for our little corner of Maine. The bartender, Vic Morrison, had been pouring drinks and collecting gossip for 30 years. If you wanted to know what was happening in town, Vic was your man. "Evan," Vic called out as I walked in. "Little early for you, isn't it?" "Just wanted to ask you about someone," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Guy named Brent Holloway. Drives a silver Porsche, lives in those fancy apartments on Elm Street." Vic's expression soured like milk in the sun. "That pretty boy asshole?" "Yeah, I know him. Comes in here sometimes, flashing money and hitting on married women. Real piece of work." How so? Brags about his conquests, if you know what I mean. Says he likes the challenge of stealing wives from their husbands. Claims he's got some lawyer's wife wrapped around his finger right now. My grip tightened on my beer bottle, but I kept my voice casual. Sounds like a real charmer. Last week he was in here with some lowlife named Derek, talking about easy money and stupid husbands. Made my skin crawl if you want to know the truth. Derek Paulson? That's the one. Small-time crook with big-time dreams. Word is he left town yesterday, real sudden-like. Packed up and disappeared without telling anyone where he was going. Interesting. Derek had taken my advice and gotten out while he could. Smart man. I finished my beer and drove home, where I spent the afternoon implementing Phase 2 of Operation, home wreck. This phase required a more subtle touch than the previous night's theatrics. Instead of direct confrontation, I was going to let Julia and Brent destroy themselves. The beauty of modern technology is that it's incredibly easy to manipulate if you know what you're doing. Brent's social media accounts were protected by passwords that would have challenged a 12-year-old. Within an hour, I had complete access to his digital life. I started small, a few posts about his expensive tastes and trust fund lifestyle. Some photos of him with married women, carefully edited to be suggestive without being explicit. Comments about his hobby of seducing other men's wives. Nothing that couldn't be explained away individually, but taken together, they painted a picture of a man with serious character flaws. Then I moved on to Julia's accounts. Her law firm took a dim view of associates who brought scandal to the practice, so I made sure her colleagues would have plenty to talk about. Photos of her and Brent together, time-stamped during hours when she should have been working. Messages discussing her boring husband and plans for a more exciting future. By the time Julia came home that evening, her phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from friends and coworkers who'd seen the posts. She tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Someone hacked my accounts, she told me over dinner, posted all kinds of lies about me. That's terrible, I said, loading concern into my voice. What kind of lies? Just stupid gossip. You know how people are. But I could see her hands shaking as she reached for her wine glass. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. That night, I listened to her call Brent from the guest room again. We need to talk, she said. In person. This whole thing is falling apart. They agreed to meet at his apartment the next evening. Perfect. That would give me time to prepare Phase 3. Saturday evening found me parked across the street from Brent's apartment building, watching Julia hurry through the lobby like a woman being chased by demons. In a way, she was. I'd spent the day making sure her digital humiliation was complete and thorough. The listening device in her purse was working perfectly, transmitting every word of their conversation to my earpiece. This is a disaster, Julia was saying. My boss called me into his office yesterday. He's talking about suspension pending an investigation into my conduct. Calm down, Brent replied, but I could hear the strain in his voice. We'll figure this out. How? Someone knows about us, Brent. They have photos, messages, everything. And Derek's disappeared. Lindsay won't return my calls. What if they talk to the police? Derek wouldn't talk. He's got too much to lose. You don't know that. And what about Lindsay? She's probably scared out of her mind. There was a long pause, and I could picture Brent trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Good luck with that, pretty boy. Maybe we should cut our losses, he said finally. Take what money I have left and disappear for a while. Let things cool down. What about Evan? What about the plan? The plan is screwed, Julia. Someone's onto us, and I don't know how or why, but they're playing for keeps. I smiled and started my car. Time for the next phase. Brent's silver Porsche was parked in its usual spot in the apartment building's garage. Getting past the security gate was child's play, a simple electronic lock picker that cost me $50 online. The Porsche itself was another matter. Brent had invested in a good alarm system, but he'd made the classic mistake of focusing on theft prevention rather than vandalism deterrence. I didn't want to steal his car. I wanted to make it unusable. The package of frozen shrimp I'd bought at the grocery store fit perfectly into the Porsche's exhaust pipe. By the time they thawed and started to rot, the smell would be impossible to remove. I also took the liberty of loosening a few valve stems on his tires. Not enough to cause a blowout, but enough to leave him stranded with 4 flat tires. The final touch was a note tucked under his windshield wiper. Payback's a bitch. So is your girlfriend. I was back home by 10 p.m., sitting in my living room and reading the same paperback thriller when Julia returned. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week, and her hands were shaking as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking up from my book. "Fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the word. "Just tired." She went to bed early, and I listened to her cry herself to sleep through the hidden microphone in our bedroom ceiling fan. Part of me felt sorry for her, a very small part. The next morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Vic called me at 8 a.m., cackling with glee. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "That Holloway kid's Porsche got vandalized last night. Someone stuffed it full of rotten fish and slashed his tires. He's been calling around town all morning trying to find someone to clean it, but the smell's so bad nobody wants to touch it." "That's terrible," I said, injecting just the right amount of false sympathy into my voice. "Gets better." Word is he's trying to leave town, but his trust fund got frozen. Something about suspicious activity on his accounts. He's broke and stranded with a car that smells like a fish market in August. I'd had nothing to do with Brent's trust fund problems, but I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice. Julia spent Sunday in bed, claiming she had a migraine. I brought her soup and aspirin and played the part of the concerned husband while she wallowed in her misery. She kept checking her phone, probably waiting for word from Brent, but her calls were going straight to voicemail. Monday morning brought the final blow. Julia's law firm called at 7 a.m. to inform her that she was being suspended without pay, pending a full investigation into her conduct. The photos and messages I'd planted had done their work perfectly. "They can't do this to me," she said, after hanging up the phone. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," I replied, buttering my toast with steady hands. These things have a way of working themselves out. But we both knew better. Julia's career was over, her reputation was in ruins, and her boyfriend had abandoned her. She was trapped in a marriage with a man she'd tried to have killed, and she had no idea how thoroughly she'd been outplayed. That afternoon, while Julia was meeting with her lawyer, I paid a visit to Lindsay Chen. She lived in a modest duplex on the south side of town, and she answered the door looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Evan," she said, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" "Just wanted to thank you," I said, smiling the kind of smile that probably didn't reach my eyes, "for being such a good friend to my wife." Lindsay tried to close the door, but I put my foot in the way. Not aggressively, just enough to keep the conversation going. "I know about Thursday night," I continued. "I know about the plan, the break-in, everything. Derek was smart enough to leave town. You might want to consider doing the same." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You helped my wife plan to have me killed so she could run off with her boyfriend and collect my insurance money. That's conspiracy to commit murder, Lindsay, the kind of charge that comes with serious prison time." Her face went white as fresh snow. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. I have video footage of you breaking into my house, audio recordings of the planning sessions, text messages, phone records, the whole thing. The only reason you're not in jail right now is because I haven't decided whether you're worth the paperwork." Lindsay's legs gave out, and she slumped against the doorframe. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Tonight. Pack a bag, get in your car, and drive until you hit the ocean. Don't come back. Don't call Julia. Don't even think about this town again. Because if I see your face around here after sunrise tomorrow, I'm going to make sure you spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary." She nodded frantically, tears streaming down her cheeks. Okay, I'll go. I'm sorry, Evan. I'm so sorry." "No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught." I walked away and left her standing in her doorway, probably already planning her escape route. By the time Julia came home that evening, Lindsay would be halfway to Canada. Tuesday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Brent Holloway had been arrested trying to steal a car from the parking lot of the bus station. Apparently, his financial situation had become desperate enough to drive him to petty crime. The irony was delicious. Julia took the news about as well as I'd expected. She locked herself in the bathroom and sobbed for an hour while I made breakfast and planned the final phase of Operation Homewreck. "I need to see him," she said when she finally emerged, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "See who?" "Brent. I need to visit him in jail." "I don't think that's a good idea, honey. You're already under investigation at work. Visiting your boyfriend in jail isn't going to help your case." The word boyfriend hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward and gripped the kitchen counter for support. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Known what? Don't play games with me, Evan." "How long have you known about Brent?" I set down my coffee cup and looked at her with the kind of cold stare I'd once reserved for enemy combatants. "Since the night you arranged to have me killed." Julia's face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a sickly green. We never. Thursday night. You called him from the guest room and set up the whole thing. Derek and Lindsay were supposed to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. I assumed the plan was for me to accidentally get killed trying to defend my home. She opened her mouth to deny it, but I held up my hand. "I have recordings, Julia. Audio, video, the whole thing. I know about the affair, the conspiracy, everything. The only reason you're not in jail with your boyfriend is because I decided to handle this privately." "What do you want?" she asked, echoing Lindsay's question from the day before. "I want you gone. Tonight. Pack whatever you can fit in your car and leave. Don't take anything that belongs to me. Don't try to claim any joint assets, and don't ever contact me again. You can't throw me out of my own house. It's not your house, Julia. It's my house. I bought it, I renovated it, and my name is the only one on the deed. You're just a guest who's overstayed her welcome." She tried to argue, but we both knew she had no leverage left. Her career was over. Her boyfriend was in jail, her co-conspirators had fled town, and I had enough evidence to put her in prison for the rest of her natural life. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Julia spent the day packing while I sat in my basement office, monitoring her activities through the hidden cameras. She tried calling several friends, but word of her disgrace had spread quickly through our small community. Nobody wanted to associate with a woman who'd tried to have her husband murdered. She also tried calling a lawyer, but her suspension from the firm had frozen her access to their legal resources, and she couldn't afford to hire private counsel. The beautiful irony was that she'd destroyed her own support network in her quest to destroy me. By evening, Julia had packed 3 suitcases and loaded them into her car. She stood in our living room one last time, looking around at the life she was leaving behind. "I loved you once," she said quietly. "No, you didn't. You loved what I could provide for you. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you drive away and never come back. I'll file for divorce in a few weeks, citing irreconcilable differences. You won't contest it, and you won't ask for alimony or property division. In exchange, I won't turn the evidence over to the police. And if I don't agree, then you'll be sharing a cell with Brent by this time tomorrow." She nodded and picked up her car keys. "I guess this is goodbye." "Yeah, it is." I watched from the front window as Julia loaded her car and drove away into the Maine twilight. Her taillights disappeared around the corner, and I knew I'd never see her again. The house felt different without her in it. Quieter, but also cleaner somehow, like an infection had been purged from the air. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my favorite chair, finally allowing myself to relax for the first time in a week. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Well played, B. Ben Morrison, my old army buddy who'd been monitoring the situation from a distance. He was the only person who knew the full truth about what I'd done and why. His approval meant more to me than Julia's condemnation ever could. I deleted the message and finished my whiskey. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life. But tonight, I was content to sit in my quiet house and savor the taste of victory. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, covering the ground in a blanket of pristine white. It felt like a new beginning, and for the first time in years, I was looking forward to whatever came next. The war was over, and I had won. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at the Rusty Anchor, enjoying a beer and listening to Vic regale the bar with gossip about the Holloway scandal, when Julia walked in. She looked terrible. Her designer clothes had been replaced with discount store basics. Her perfect hair was lank and unwashed, and she'd lost at least 15 pounds. The woman who'd once commanded every room she entered now looked like a ghost of her former self. The conversation in the bar died as every head turned to stare at her. Julia had been the talk of the town for weeks, and seeing her in person was like spotting a celebrity at the grocery store. A disgraced, desperate celebrity who'd fallen as far as it was possible to fall. She spotted me at the bar and walked over with the unsteady gait of someone who'd been drinking before she arrived. "Hello, Evan," she said, sliding onto the stool next to mine. "Julia, I thought you'd left town. I tried, but it turns out the world is a lot smaller than I thought. Word travels fast in legal circles and nobody wants to hire a lawyer who tried to have her husband murdered." Vic was pretending to clean glasses while obviously listening to every word. The rest of the bar had gone quiet, and I could feel every eye in the place focused on our conversation. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to make a deal." "We already made a deal." "You left, and I didn't have you arrested." That was the extent of our negotiation. Julia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think you've won, don't you? You think you're so smart with your surveillance equipment and your military training. But you missed something important." "Did I?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Remember this? Derek found it in your safe the night he broke in. The night you let him walk away instead of calling the police." I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. I'd been so focused on the evidence Derek had found that I hadn't considered what he might have taken. "This little device contains something very interesting," Julia continued. "Your voice, explaining exactly how you manipulated the whole situation, how you planted evidence, hacked our phones, and orchestrated our downfall. It's quite a confession, actually. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. You still conspired to have me killed. But it does change things. Because this recording proves that you're not the innocent victim you've been pretending to be. You're a manipulative sociopath who destroyed multiple lives for your own amusement." She was right, and we both knew it. If that recording became public, it would paint me as the villain in this story. My reputation, my career, my entire life would be ruined. "What do you want?" I asked again. "I want half of everything. The house, the bank accounts, the investments. I want a fair divorce settlement, and I want you to provide a character reference so I can find work again. And if I refuse, then this recording goes to the police, the media, and anyone else who might be interested. I may be ruined, but I'll take you down with me." I looked around the bar, noting the positions of every person in the room. Vic was still pretending to clean glasses, but his hand was resting on something under the bar, probably a baseball bat or a gun. The other patrons were watching our conversation like it was a tennis match. "You know what your problem is, Julia?" I said, finishing my beer and setting the bottle down with deliberate care. You never learned when to quit. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and pressed a button. Immediately, Julia's voice filled the bar, broadcast through the same speaker system I'd used to terrorize Derek and Lindsay. Are you sure Derek knows what he's doing? What if Evan wakes up? What if something goes wrong? The color drained from Julia's face as her own words condemned her in front of a room full of witnesses. But I wasn't done yet. That's why Derek's bringing insurance. Don't worry. It'll look like a burglary gone wrong. These things happen all the time. The recording continued for another 30 seconds, laying out the entire conspiracy in Julia's own voice. When it finished, the bar was dead silent. You see, I said, standing up and tossing a 20 on the bar, I never trusted you to honor our deal. So I made sure I had insurance of my own. Julia was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You bastard. You recorded our private conversations, just like you recorded mine. The difference is, my recordings prove you're a would-be murderer. Yours just prove I'm smarter than you gave me credit for. I leaned in close, speaking quietly, so only she could hear. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to walk out of this bar, get in your car, and drive away. You're going to disappear completely, and you're never going to contact me or anyone else in this town again. Because if you do, I'll make sure that recording gets played at your murder trial. You can't prove I actually tried to kill you. Derek and Lindsay are gone. Derek's in county lockup in Pennsylvania, picked up for burglary 3 days ago. Funny thing about career criminals, they always need money, and they're always willing to make deals with prosecutors. I'm sure he'd love to testify about your little conspiracy in exchange for a reduced sentence. Julia's face went white. She hadn't known about Derek's arrest, which meant she had no idea how much danger she was really in. As for Lindsay, I continued, she's working as a waitress in a truck stop outside Buffalo. Turns out running away doesn't solve your problems, it just relocates them. She'd probably jump at the chance to cooperate with law enforcement if it meant avoiding prison time. I straightened up and smiled at the room full of witnesses. Gentlemen, I think my wife was just leaving. Julia looked around the bar, seeing nothing but hostile faces staring back at her. These people had heard her confession, had listened to her plan to murder one of their own. There would be no sympathy here, no support, no second chances. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking with rage and fear. This isn't over, Evan. Yes, it is. Julia walked toward the door on unsteady legs, and I could hear her muttering curses under her breath. But she was beaten, and we both knew it. The recording she'd thought was her trump card had become her death warrant. Just before she reached the door, she turned back to face me one last time. I hope you're happy, she said. I'm getting there. She pushed through the door and disappeared into the night, leaving behind nothing but the echo of her footsteps and the lingering scent of desperation. The bar remained quiet for a long moment. Then Vic cleared his throat and looked at me with something approaching respect. Damn, Evan. Remind me never to get on your bad side. The tension broke, and conversation gradually resumed. But I could feel the change in how people looked at me. I was no longer just the quiet security consultant who kept to himself. I was the man who'd outmaneuvered a conspiracy to kill him and destroyed his enemies without breaking a single law. I finished my beer and walked out into the cold Maine night. Snow was falling again, and the streets were empty except for the occasional car passing by. I walked home slowly, savoring the taste of complete victory. Julia's car was gone from the driveway, and the house was dark except for the porch light I'd left on. I climbed the front steps and unlocked the door, stepping into the warm silence of my home. My phone buzzed with a text message. This time it was from Julia. You win. I'm leaving town tonight. You'll never see me again. I deleted the message without replying and poured myself a whiskey. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in pristine white. It was beautiful and peaceful, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at home in my own house. I raised my glass in a silent toast to victory, justice, and the sweet satisfaction of a job well done. Julia was gone, Brent was in jail, Derek and Lindsay were fugitives, and I was exactly where I belonged. The war was over, and I had won every battle.